Are you struggling on what topic you would pursue for your thesis or dissertation? So watch this video as we explore the possible topics you can pursue for your masteral, doctoral, or any research you need to conduct under this new normal. By the way, don't forget to subscribe and like this video in order to download a copy of this PowerPoint. We are hoping that you can use this PowerPoint presentation as a reference and a means to share this knowledge to others. Just visit the video description for the details. Alright, so before we start, let me just take note that most of the contents of our discussion is actually based from DepEd Order 39 series of 2016, which is the Basic Education Research Agenda. Let me just manifest that this issuance will actually help us have our research funded under the Basic Education Research Fund. So if you have or align your research under these research agenda, you'll be able to have your research funded if you apply. Alright, so before we proceed, let us first discuss the topics that we're going to cover. First of all, we're going to start with the rationale of research agenda. So we're going to look at the topics and then we'll also discuss the framework. So that includes the research themes and the questions that are involved. And one by one, we're going to cover all the themes. That includes the teaching and learning, which is theme 1. And then we'll cover child protection policy, which is theme 2. And then the human resource development, which is theme 3. And then the last but not the least is theme 4, which is under governance. We're also going to cover a few of the different cross-cutting themes that we need to take note that is usually integrated among these 4 themes. So we're going to discuss that later on. That includes disaster risk reduction and many other things, including climate change adaptation and etc. Right. So let's now proceed to the rationale. So if we try to see the purpose of the Basic Education Research Agenda, it is actually and mostly based from the vision and mission. Okay, so you can see there that our vision is we dream of Filipinos who passionately love their country and whose values and competencies enable them to realize their full potential. So this is actually what we want to achieve. Okay, how we envision our learners to be and what their education will help them achieve. And at the same time, in order for us to achieve this vision, we are actually having a clear picture of how we're going to achieve this vision. And this is what we call now our mission. So as we can see, our students are defined as someone which is child-friendly. They are learning actually in an environment which is child-friendly, gender-sensitive, safe, and motivating. And the teachers, in the other hand, are described as facilitators of learning. And at the same time, as they facilitate learning, they should be nurturing towards every learner, right? So how do we envision the administrators and staff? So they should be stewards of the institution, enabling supportive environment for effective learning to happen. And there should be a large involvement of the family, community, and other stakeholders. So we visualize this as someone who will be actively engaged and they share responsibility for developing our lifelong learners. So these are actually our vision and our mission. So our target outcomes is actually based from this. So every Filipino has an access to complete basic education. Complete basic education is quality education. It should be effective, transparent, engaging. As you can see there are 3 themes, target outcomes. That includes access, quality, and governance. So we are actually showing you this because all the research agenda and our actions are actually based on these 3 things, which are the vision, the mission, and the target outcomes of DepEd. So basically, you see here the derivation of our basic education research agenda, which is covering 4 themes. That includes the teaching and learning, right? Then we have the child protection policy, followed by human resource development, which deals with we have the largest number of government employees. So it's very important that we also improve this aspect of DepEd. And then we also have governance. As you can see, there are 3 things that are encompassing or cross-cutting across different themes. This includes disaster risk reduction management. So that means if it's cross-cutting, it means even if it's in child protection policy, you can talk about disaster risk reduction. And then we also talk about inclusive education. How do we create an education that is applicable to all kinds of students despite their difference in their ethnicity or any other factors that may cause them to have less access to education. And then we also have gender development. So, the essence of gender equity and the ability to really give equal access to both gender is important, right? So these are called cross-cutting themes, meaning all other themes there can actually talk about all these themes. Like, for example, as I mentioned a while ago, gender development could be found in governance, could be found in human resource development, could be found in child protection policy, and at the same time on the teaching and learning. So that is what we mean by cross-cutting. And as we can see in the diagram, it is actually encompassing among all the four themes, right? So if we try to look at the first theme, it is teaching and learning. So what are the possible topics that you can cover under teaching and learning? So we have theme 1. Again, theme 1 is teaching and learning. So let's look at the strategies. Under theme 1, we look into strategies, best practices, facilitating and hindering factors relative to the following sub-themes. So as we can see, we have one theme, but there are specific sub-themes under the teaching learning theme. First of all is instruction. So how do we deliver instruction? Next is the curriculum. So how does the child experience, the whole experience of a child inside the school, right? Or in the teaching learning process. And we have the learners. And then we have assessment. So how do we assess learners' performance? And lastly is learning outcomes, which deals with the results, instruction by which our learners are exposed to. So those are important sub-themes, and we're going to look at what important questions could we talk about under each of the theme. So let's start first with instruction. So strategies to enhance the teaching and learning process. So this is the most common question, no? The most basic question we need to ask. How do we improve the teaching and learning process? So as a teacher, as someone who is in the front line, we are in direct contact to our learners. So we need to really ask, how do we improve and what strategies can we employ? So we need to hone well-rounded learners able to compete with the current and future economies. So we want to design a learner who is capable of doing this. So how do we do that? So factors are very important. So we are already given a general research question. So the question is, what factors affect the teacher's delivery of the curriculum? So that includes, class size. If you want to study that, you can also do that. Like, for example, your topic is about class size and its effect to the teacher's delivery of the curriculum. See, you already have a title, right? So some of us are really struggling with the title, right? So you can also have contact time, its effect to the teacher's delivery to the curriculum. That's another title, right? So we also have materials and resources. So you can also have a question like materials and resources and its effect to the teacher's delivery of the curriculum, right? So, all these topics are actually very common. And if you're a teacher who is struggling to look for how or what research are you going to cover, all you have to do is to really look into this research agenda here. And I'm sure you come up with a good title. And it is very relevant, right? So we have also information and communication technology in education, which is right now very important under the new normal. So, right now we are actually transitioning to a different kind of instruction. So I think research under this field is very important now. So how is information and communication technology in education being applied, and how does it affect the delivery of the curriculum? So those are questions you need to ask, and those are topics you can really cover. We also have language. There are really a lot of questions we need to consider. Let's say, for example, is the medium of instruction effective? Let's say, for example, for grade 1 to 3, is it effective to use the MTB, the mother tongue, right? Or are there confusions regarding what is MTB, MLE? One of the major investigations we can do is actually, is MTB, MLE properly implemented, right? So those are questions you need to ask, because when you say MTB, MLE, you're not limited to the language. Let's say, for example, you're from Cebu. It doesn't limit you to Cebuano language. So if it's an MTB, it's a mother tongue, you can use English. If the language of the child, or the mother tongue language of the child is English, then he should use the English language. there might be confusions in how this is implemented in the field. So you need to take note of all of this. Continuing professional development and support. So these are also important factors that will affect the delivery of the curriculum. So you can also study that one. Let's say, for example, how does coaching and mentoring and learning action cell really affect? So right now, there are times that teachers are really doing the lax session. So the question is this really effective? And does this improve the teacher's delivery of the curriculum? So those are important questions. You also have classroom management, positive discipline. Is it effective to use positive discipline or violent discipline? All these things are very, very important questions you need to ask, right? So learning space. Does learning space affect the delivery of the curriculum? Yes, we know there are a lot of studies regarding this one. But how exactly is it affecting the delivery of the curriculum? We also have lesson planning and creation of instructional materials. So all these things here, including the teacher profile, the lesson planning, how does this affect the delivery of the curriculum? Those are very important questions you need to ask. Okay? So there are claims that lesson plan is actually useless. For some teachers, they say that lesson planning doesn't really affect how they deliver the curriculum. But is this really true? Does research support this one? So, these are things that can make your research very interesting. If you're putting it in a perspective by which you are curious and in a perspective that is also, which resonates to the clamors in the field. So, you need to be very mindful of all these things, okay, the current issues. And if you want to prove them wrong or prove them right, you need to do it by research, because that's the only way to really scientifically prove if you're right or wrong. All right, so let's proceed now to the next one. This includes what teaching, learning strategies can teachers apply to ensure inclusive and learner-centered education. So this time, the question now delves with what strategies can teachers do in order to ensure an inclusive and learner-centered environment for our learners. So this includes the following topics. That includes inclusive education under special education or SPED, and then also IPED, which includes the indigenous people's education. So you can study them. How are they coping up with their integration to the majority of the learners? And then we also have madrasa education. And for our out-of-school youth, we have the alternative learning system. And then we also have the alternative delivery modes. Actually, different delivery modes has been available before in different means. But right now, we are currently implementing it because of the pandemic. So how does this affect our learners? So these are very timely questions we need to ask right now, because now more than ever, equity and being fair to all kinds of learners has become more important. So there are learners who has no access to computer, who has problems with gadgets, and they are just, their option is actually they have no option but to use the modules. So this is actually a struggle for some of our learners, because whether we like it or not, online learning, which is a form of synchronous learning, will actually really differ from those who are doing asynchronous learning using modules. Okay, so disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. So these are very important topics also under instruction. And then we also have child-centered approach. And then we have emerging good practices. So what are the good practices being done by the teachers that makes their classes more inclusive and learner-centered? So those are included. And then we also have ICT in education. And then we also have differentiated instruction. So how do you differentiate your instruction based on the differences of our learners? Okay, so those are important topics. Then we have individual learning styles and multiple intelligences. And then we also have collaborative learning. And then we also have classroom management. So how do we implement positive discipline in our respective classrooms? So for curriculum sub-theme, here we talk about the contribution of the K-12 curriculum in improving learning outcomes. So there has been a major revision in our curriculum. So how does this affect our curriculum now, especially our learning outcomes? So effective integration of disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation are also part of this sub-theme. So questions involve how is the curriculum able to contribute in achieving learning outcomes? Does it really help? So one of the major characteristics of our curriculum is that it has what you call contextualization, having our topics, our subjects, our instruction based on the context of our learners. And then how does the number of subjects, the various subjects, contribute to the overall learning of our learners? Then we also have spiral progression in the curriculum. So is spiral progression really effective? There are a lot of studies claiming that this is not effective. Do you agree? So those are questions you can pursue in your research. We also have higher order thinking skills. Are we developing higher order thinking skills from our learners, or is there a problem with how they are currently learning? Then we also have, how do you integrate the disaster risk reduction and the the climate change adaptation, or the CCA, right? So those are things you can do under this general research question, right? So another research question is that how is the curriculum responsive and relevant to the learners? So again, contextualization is composed of two things. You can call it localization and indigenization. Localization deals with materials that are locally available in your vicinity or area that you can use to make learning more contextualized, more engaging, more relatable to the learners. Indigenization is more deeper compared to localization because you are now integrating something that is very close to the heart of the learners, which is actually dealing with the culture and things that they're used to doing. So those are different levels of contextualization, and you need to really study how contextualized curriculum is being implemented in the K-12. So is this relevant to the learners? Those are questions you need to ask. And does it really improve how we deliver our curriculum? All right. So let's now proceed to the next sub-theme, which is the learners. So under learner sub-theme, we study the developmental and social behavioral effects of the teaching learning process to the learners. So general research questions include what factors affect the learning behaviors of our learners. So here we see child development, external and internal environment. Okay, so that includes whatever is inside and outside the child, right? So that includes the genes or the experiences of the child. So that actually influence their behavior. Another one is teaching strategies and multiple intelligences. Another question that we can pursue is what contributes to the value formation of the learners. So you can actually include the following. We have school influence. How much does this really contribute to the formation of the learners? Does this contribute really? How we design our schools to be? How much is the influence that the school can do for our learners? And then we also have the community, then our culture, and the extra and co-curricular activities. So there has been claims that the extracurricular activities doesn't really contribute to the learning of the child, but some of the studies really disagree with this. So these are things you can pursue. Another general question is what makes a well-rounded, happy, and smart learner? So you may include the following factors: school influence, community, culture, and the extra and co-curricular activities. Do they really like this one? Does this make them well-rounded, happy, and smart? All right, so let's proceed now to the next sub-theme, which is assessment. So this is very important topic under this new normal, because we need to also redesign our assessment. As mentioned before, everything now is open notes, and the modules can easily be filled up by their parents, by their brothers or sisters, in order for them to really have, to assume that they have really submitted the modules already. Well, in fact, it's not really contributing anything to their learning. So you need to be very mindful in how we do assessment. So general questions under this topic includes what factors affect the implementation of classroom assessment. So topics you can do is classroom assessment, formative and summative, emerging good practices under assessment. You can feature one practices and you can check it if it's effective or not. Teachers' expertise in constructing various types of assessment. It is very important. No? Some of our teachers really don't know how to create, assessment, which is under, following the principles of what assessment should be. So how much do they know about this? So these are very important questions. And we can see this by the kind of examinations they are doing or they are creating. Availability of assessment tools and resources. The example is materials, manpower, environment, portfolio assessment. Alright, so another very important question we need to ask also, another general question we can pursue is how is assessment conducted and utilized in the Philippine education system? So what are the levels of classroom assessment? That includes classroom assessments, national assessment, international assessment, and system assessments. So this question refers to the process of conducting assessments as well as its utilization in terms of policy formulation, implementation, resource allocation, training of teachers and personnel, and review and improvement of curriculum and instruction, and also progress tracking of learners. So these are very important general questions we can also pursue because some of the countries are having rigid national assessments, but here in in the Philippines, we are actually doing it as a sampling. Sometimes our national achievement test is in a form of sampling and doesn't really cover all of the schools. So these are questions we need to ask. How does this impact our educational system? Right. So all right. So we also have another question under assessment, which includes how effective is recognition of prior learning, or the RPL, in determining students' special programs. So basically, this includes the basic literacy program and the accreditation and the equivalency, and also the Philippine Educational Placement Test, the PEPT, and other special programs that actually deals with recognition of prior learning. So it's very important for us also to study how these actually impact our learners and how this impact our educational system. Learning outcomes. So investigates what drives achievement by assessing and comparing the progress of learners across subjects, grade level, and geographical region. So if we try to look at this, this is another sub-theme under instruction. So we see that we also want to know if learners are having difficulties in terms of their subjects, grade level, and in terms of their performance across geographical region. So research questions under learning outcomes includes what factors affect the achievement of learning outcomes. So you have factors here already detailed for you. You can include teacher's profile, learning environment, learning resources, language, assessment, governance. Right. So does this mean that learners with teachers with higher profile, higher training, higher experience, does this equate to more outcomes, more learning outcomes for our students? These are questions. More learning resources, does this equate to more learning for our learners? Questions like that. So another general question is, how does achievement of expected learning outcomes vary in terms of practices per region, division, or school? Right. So there are two things we need to take note here. Achievement of our learnings is our major point of interest, and then their practices. So does these practices really contribute to the achievement of our learners? So if we try to look at this, we're trying to look for best practices that we can also apply. So topics include regional division, school variation, school typology, the role of leaders, geographic, political, economic factors, the level of partnership with the LGU and public organizations and institutions. Alright, so we'll now proceed to theme 2, which is child protection policy. So the theme actually recognizes that a child's condition can significantly affect the achievement of learning outcomes. So studies the prevalence and effects of violations of child protection policy and assess the effectiveness of previous interventions and studies potential new approaches to better protect learners in the school. So basically, we are, from the word itself, we're trying to protect our learners. So we try to see how this will affect their achievement and their learning outcomes. So the main topics include the following. How can DepEd best address the following child protection concerns? This includes bullying, teenage pregnancy. So we can really specify. We can have physical bullying, emotional bullying, cyberbullying. Then we also have general topics that you can study on. And then for teenage pregnancy, reproductive health, and education. And we also have child abuse, addiction, media consumption, And it's not really hard for us to really look for factors because specific topics are already included here, right? So you see here very important factors or considerations or topics you can cover in your research study. All right, so we'll now proceed to theme 3, which is the human resource development. So, theme 3 involves studies in how to nurture the vast capital involved in delivering basic education. So, the Department of Education is one of the biggest government agencies. So, we need to really learn and to study how to nurture this vast human capital. This also involves the following sub-themes. So, this includes teaching and non-teaching qualifications and hiring, career development, and employee welfare. Our primary focus in human resource development is really to take a look at our teachers because as we all know, they are currently our frontliners and they have an important role to play in reaching out to our learners. One of the sub-themes here is that teaching and non-teaching qualifications and hiring. So main general question is how effective is the professional development framework in the delivery of the K-12 curriculum. So are there things we need to change in terms of specialization, the quality of years of experience, language proficiency, academic skills, psychosocial skills, ICT integration in teaching? So we have an explanation here. This research question intends to examine the responsiveness of the department's existing professional development framework. So are there anything that we can actually contribute to improving the professional development framework? So that could be something you can do for your study, right? So another thing is what qualifications and competencies are required for teaching in an inclusive learning environment. So this includes skills for inclusive education. So how do we make our delivery of education more inclusive? Then we have disaster risk reduction with that is DRR. And then CCA, which is climate change adaptation. How do we teach this to our learners? And then teaching beginning reading, which is one of the most challenging part is actually teaching our learners how to read from kindergarten to grade 3. And then we have qualification standards and criteria for hiring. How do we improve these qualification standards in order for us to really hire effective and efficient teachers? Level of psychosocial skills of our learners, of our teachers, right? And then the level of interpersonal skills. So these are very important factors we need to consider towards hiring of our teachers. So another topic we can actually discuss under this theme is that we can ask the question, how can pre-service teacher education be improved to develop teachers who can effectively deliver the K-12 curriculum? So this is actually the onboarding part. So how do we make our teachers really be ready towards their work and to be ready towards being a frontliner? So teacher education institutions, that includes core courses that we need to integrate in our pre-service training, relevant non-core courses, new courses, preparation on the contextualization of the curriculum. How do we do that? And then we also have integration of the disaster risk reduction and the climate change adaptation, preparation towards helping teachers really learn how to teach beginning reading, and then we also have inclusive education. All right, so what qualifications and competencies are required for non-teaching staff to support the effective delivery of the K-12 curriculum? So this includes qualification standards and criteria for hiring, psychosocial skills, interpersonal skills, and technical skills. All right, so another question we can also ask is that what are the issues and challenges in hiring public school teachers and how can these be assessed? So this includes localization law, ranking system, natural vacancies. All these issues actually we might as well as have this studied, right? So you can actually gather data using the internet and other social media accounts. All right, so we'll also talk about career development. So under the sub-theme, we take interest to both teaching and non-teaching capacity building needs. So this examines various dimensions and determinants of their professional growth. So we're done with hiring. This time, we're going to investigate how we can develop them in terms of their career. So how can selection, retention, assessment, development, promotion, and recognition be enhanced to support DepEd employees in different career stages? All right, so again, we have the following subtopics: overall training program, specialist training program, process of capacity building, training strategy, selection process, practical application, monitoring and evaluation, and other development options for classroom training, coaching, and mentoring experience. So again, we are actually outlining here the different factors you can try to take a look into towards the development of their respective careers. So of our employees here in the Department of Education. So we'll now proceed to the next part, which is the employee welfare. So we explore monetary and non-monetary strategies as well as non-traditional mechanisms to keep its personnel, especially teachers, as we keep them motivated to perform well. So here we study how salary and benefits actually help our teachers become more motivated. So you can actually study this one in terms of the non-cash compensation, awards, protection and safeguards, grievance mechanism, teaching load, ancillary services, employee wellness, including emotional and spiritual, including mental. We also have hazard pay, risk assurance or risk insurance, monetization program, gender and development. So another part of employee welfare is that what motivates teaching and non-teaching personnel to sustain commitment and passion to high-quality teaching, learning, and work performance. So that includes their intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So when you say intrinsic, that deals with something that is innate and within the teacher. So what really motivates them on their own right. So another one is extrinsic motivation. This includes their salary, their awards, the recognition that we give to our teachers in order for them to be motivated towards teaching and to really perform well. Right, so we have theme 4. So this covers the following sub-themes: planning, finance, program management, transparency, and accountability, and then evaluation. So we also cover challenges in the planning process and how to ensure the achievement of the department's goals. So under governance, we have, again, planning, the sub-theme planning. So this deals with the standards and policies that ensure the achievement of the department's goals. So how does this planning actually contribute to our achievement of its goals? So these are things you can really look into. And try to look at the research questions here. How can DepEd determine the effective and efficient standards for critical education resources for schools, community learning centers, and other delivery units? So you can explore the following. This includes the process and tools used for typologies and classifications. Are there something you need to do to improve these tools that we are currently using? Including all the critical resources that we have here as we try to measure all of them. Is there a better way of actually measuring them? That includes, teaching and teaching related personnel, counting the educational facilities, tools and equipments that we have, etc. So another question is, how can DepEd improve its planning process across levels? So how do we conduct strategic planning? Do you have any proposal to do this? Operations planning, data management. How do we do data management to improve how we plan in DepEd? How do we conduct monitoring and evaluation? Sometimes when we do too much collection of data to the point that teachers are only collecting data, they're not even doing their class anymore. So that is already counterproductive. So we need to really suggest something that will help our learners, our teachers improve their craft. So we also have policy on research and development. Right. So we also have financial management. So the general research question is, how can DepEd improve its process in sourcing, acquisition, disbursement, recording, and reporting of the program and project funds, consistent with applicable laws, policies, rules, and regulations? So you can include policies, practices, issues and challenges, budget deliberation, and budget execution, and etc. Right. So another question we need to ask is, how does financial performance affect key stakeholders in DepEd? So we can study the fund managers, the target beneficiaries, the community itself, and the DepEd internal stakeholders. Right. So under program management, under another sub-theme, we now focus on how DepEd can best develop, improve how they monitor and evaluate programs, projects, and activities. So the main research question here is that, how effective is DepEd's overall program management system? So you can explore the following topics you can see here: program project development, operational efficiency, etc. Right, so we'll now proceed to another question. How can we maximize external partnerships locally and abroad to facilitate the delivery of basic education? So this time we can also study how DepEd is actually conducting their partnerships. So one area of interest from this research question is the delivery of basic education services to undocumented Filipino learners abroad. So we can do we can take a look at the bilateral and multilateral agreements, public-private partnerships, build, operate, transfer, build, lease, transfer, and build, transfer. Right, so we also have another sub-theme here that deals with transparency and accountability. And the general research question is really what factors affect the transparency and accountability in DepEd operations. So you can explore topics including the procurement law, the transparency reporting, the accounting and auditing rules, implementing units, fiscal autonomy, manpower, research requirements, process audit, and engagement of the stakeholders. Right? So still under transparency and accountability, we can also talk about how effective are internal business processes in allowing the public to monitor and document the performance of DepEd. Right, so another very important research question we can also explore is that what factors affect the transparency and accountability in DepEd operations? So we can take a look at the following topics: procurement law, accounting auditing rules, transparency reporting, implementing units, fiscal autonomy, and etc. So you can actually take a look at all these factors and how they are currently implemented, and you can create or make your suggestions, or you can create your own action plan to help improve our current practices. Another very important research question is how effective are internal business processes in allowing the public to monitor and document the performance of DepEd. So you can check on the compliance to laws, policies, rules, and regulations, government accounting and auditing manual, the Republic Act 9184 or the procurement law, the DepEd orders, and etc. So another question is how can schools effectively respond to grievances from teachers, learners, parents, and the community? So take a look at the policies, practices. Is this effective or not? The school structures that are currently implemented, the nature, the types, the issues and challenges, and how they resolve their own problems and how we can improve them. So we also have evaluation. So monitoring can cover a multitude of topics since it provides timely information for periodic decisions that need to be made while implementing various programs, policies, and activities. Evaluation, on the other hand, is actually different. We try to look if the undertaking we are doing has produced the intended result that we want to have. And, we try to make that decision whether we are going to continue, discontinue, or revise the said program or undertaking at the appropriate stages of the cycle. So evaluation is very important because we need to identify if do we need to continue this kind of program or is this just a waste of our resources. So we ask this question and your research can actually help us in this part. So we ask this question: how effective have DepEd policies, programs, and projects have been in meeting their stated objectives? And what are the unintended consequences? So unintended consequences are really something you can study because there are times that this is our intention, but the results are actually different. And sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. And that is very common in DepEd. We want to solve something and then we create a program. And at the end of the day, we actually create more problems than what we have before. So these are very important things we need to study, and research could be a cure, a real cure, not just a temporary cure in actually dealing with this phenomena. Okay, so as a researcher, I hope you will try to look at this. So topics we can do is decentralization, private school regulations, community engagement and participation. All the guidelines that we have currently released are something that we can actually evaluate under this theme. All right, so another question is how effective have DepEd policies, programs, and projects been in meeting their stated objectives? Are we really achieving what we want to achieve? Are we achieving our intended objectives? And then we ask the question, are there unintended consequences? And we see here same topics that we can cover. And take note that these are the topics, suggested topics, but we are not limited to these topics. Alright, so how can DepEd maximize the benefits gained from evaluation outputs and expertise from within and outside the department? And how can DepEd improve its evaluation process? And you can use the following topics here in the other side. And the cross-cutting themes. So let's try to take note. As mentioned before, there are themes that may cut cross among the themes that we have mentioned. So this includes disaster risk reduction, gender development, and inclusive education. So let's try to take a look at the disaster risk reduction management. So it is divided into three actually, the prevention and mitigation, and we have here our research questions. So take note of them. If you want to study disaster risk reduction, this is also a very important and very relevant topic you can pursue. We also have under preparedness in order for our schools and our division offices to be ready against disaster. And then we also talk about response. So you also have here all the topics you can cover. And then we also have rehabilitation and recovery. Once the calamity is done, we need to be well versed as to what we are going to do in order to rehabilitate ourselves and to recover. Right. So another topic is gender and development. So under gender and development, we may delve into gender mainstreaming and gender responsiveness of DepEd structures and the policies, programs, and projects. Are we really being gender sensitive? Are we really pro-gender development? So these are questions you need to ask. We also have inclusive education. So again, all these three topics can actually be found across all the themes we have discussed. So this is a cross-cutting theme. Right? So as you can see, how ready is DepEd in providing an inclusive learning environment? So those are questions you need to ask. Are we really ready? And what will make us ready? So what are the perceptions of the internal and external stakeholders on inclusive education in the Philippine educational system? Right. All right. So in the next video, we'll talk about how are you going to search for journals if you have chosen one of the topics there. So the next step for you now in doing your research is actually to look for journals that will help you in developing your literature review, your rationale, your review of related lit, your all the parts of your research. So if you want to watch the next video, please go ahead and subscribe and like this video, and don't forget to comment in the comment box all the next video requests for the coming days. So if you hit the notification button or the ring, you'll be notified if I upload the next video. So please go ahead and do that. Click the ring button so that you'll be able to be notified once our next video will be released. And then don't forget to check out the video description for details on how to download the PowerPoint presentation. We are doing this because we want you also to share this PowerPoint presentation to others. At the same time, you can make it as your own personal reference. Do not forget that by sharing, you are also making a difference in the lives of others. So don't forget to share this video, subscribe, and like the video, and let's keep the love growing. Let's help more teachers become more proficient, help them improve and become better teachers. I'll see you in the next video.